Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for
Not
joining
at all. Not
me
at all.
this afternoon. Joyce, it's fantastic to be able to talk about Scottish Pen with you. And as you know, this is in fact the fourth interview we've
Mhm,
had as
mhm,
part of a series sponsored by the Royal Society of Edinburgh
mhm,
on the history of Scottish Pen. And
mhm,
that's exactly what we'll be talking about for the next few minutes. And I'd like to kick off questions just by asking you when you first got involved with Scottish Pen, you know, why you joined, and we'll start from there.
Do you know, I couldn't remember how many years I've been a member. It's probably about 10 years now.
Hmm.
Why I joined, I was asked, I was asked if I would go on the board. And so I joined PEN because obviously, but I've always known about PEN because I've been involved in the literary scene in Scotland for many years, both as an academic and as a practitioner. So I thought it was a marvelous chance to get an international perspective about the alliances that can be formed between writers throughout the world. And the thing about PEN is it's a level playing field for writers. You know, you can have well-known, renowned writers, or you can have people who are just setting out or have written in different ways. And I thought that would be interesting. I also hoped I'd have something to contribute with the various literary organisations I've been involved with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been quite a challenging experience, but it's been good. It's been good.
Mm-hmm. And what, like, should we just jump in and go straight to those challenges? What have been the challenges over the years, of different sorts that you've encountered? I mean, obviously, many of them probably positive challenges and
Oh, I
some.
think so, most of them are very positive. I think things have changed a lot over the last few years because of technology and digital media, and I think it's put more pressures on writers. Um, Also, I think writers are quite individualistic, so I think you get quite a lot of not conflict, but you know, there's a lot of healthy discussion goes on among writers. It's not cozy at all,
Mm,
and we try and work out ways of helping other writers or listening to other writers, especially if they've got different opinions to us. I think it's a good forum, but it's
mm,
certainly not cozy, and it's not it, uh, you know, in a negative way. It's supportive,
yeah.
and it's supportive in a very real way, and so you have to keep on your toes, which is good, which is
Yeah.
good, which
I
is
do
good.
think it's always had that sense, that sort of equal sense of, and has maintained that sense of all diverse opinions welcome, and you know,
Well,
everyone.
I think so, right from its origins, when it had Hugh MacDiarmid, of course, in
Yeah.
Scotland, who wasn't the easiest of men, but was certainly very interesting. I think yes, I think it's always managed to contain different opinions and different voices.
Mm,
Um, I mean, we had a project a few years ago called Many Voices because we wanted to make people aware of the diversity and the many ways of approaching things that there are in Scotland and the different kinds of writers there are. So yeah, I think it's.
and
I
do you
think
think it's extended its diversity as well? Do you think it's being able to, that those perhaps new technologies that you've mentioned have maybe enabled greater accessibility, as well as maybe bringing, you know.
I think they have. Yes, I think they certainly have, as technology has to us all. Though I'm a bit of a Luddite in the sense that I think there's nothing like going to hear a writer talking about their own work or reading their own work, or actually there's an energy that you get in a festival or in a room that you don't get elsewhere. But I think technology has been very useful, and I think it's been immensely useful throughout the world for writers who find themselves confined
Mm,
in various places. I mean, I was hearing about a Turkish novelist recently who dictated the whole of his novel on his mobile phone.
yes, yes.
So, you know, it sounds a bit odd, but it works. So I think it is enabling. I mean, as you know, Mandelstam used to engrave his poems on bars of soap, which was smuggled out of prison. Well, perhaps the mobile's a better medium than a bar of soap, I think.
Yeah.
I think the downside to technology is it can be manipulated.
Mm,
And the work we've done recently on freedom of expression and defamation, and looking at this quite seriously. It's been a new departure for us, but I think it's been an important one, really, to defend freedom of expression. And I mean, there have been a lot of very hectic debates about this, and there still are, as you know. Last week in Oxford, there have been debates about this. I think this is inevitable, but I think that's healthy.
Yeah, but you think, I mean, there's always, I suppose, at the heart of PEN, that constitution, that framework that you mentioned sort of indirectly in terms of supportiveness. I mean, that's always been the foundation, hasn't it? That those are the terms of engagement, of kind of a framework of mutual support, as well as inviting difference and
yeah. I know a great part of cementing me in PEN, in a way. Cement's perhaps the wrong word. It sounds a bit like the mafia, but it's not. But I think for me, kind of crystallized how I felt about PEN when I went to the international conference in Iceland a few years ago, and became aware of the experiences of conflict and oppression that writers were having in the countries they've come from. And that was very open. It was, we had 2 delegations from China, because, there are different attitudes towards what writers should do. And I think it's important we engage with this. I mean, it's the real world. It's no good thinking writing is just a personal, internalized thing. It's part of a wider community. And I felt quite humbled by the whole experience in Iceland of writers who'd shown tremendous courage in writing. Yeah. Even things that you and I wouldn't seem particularly political. So, that really, and of course, some PEN throughout the world, some PEN organizations are able to provide safe havens for writers. We're hoping that we might be able to negotiate that in Scotland, and we're undergoing that at the moment to see if we can find a place where we can provide even a temporary haven for writers to come before they relocate themselves, because some of them now have the choice of leaving their country of origin or being in prison.
Yeah, so actually in physical danger or danger, the process of being in flight from the
absolutely.
That's very interesting what you say about not assuming that direct relationship between writing and publication and debate, and that there is so much more at stake in certain contexts in certain countries. In that journey, there's more at stake in
oh yes, absolutely.
When you are published, that's not the smooth journey.
Yeah, and it's there, as we know, there has been a rise of right-wing extremism or fascism, whatever you like to call it, in various countries. And the writers are always the first, often journalists, are always the first to be imprisoned, oppressed, lose their jobs. Academics are usually the next, and then along with judges. So but these things are serious, and at the moment in this country we don't have these problems. But PEN's been very involved with the defamation bill, the hate and crime public order bill that's going through the Scottish government, as you probably know at the moment. We've been doing a lot with that. We've written a lot of submissions about freedom of expression, the strength and the freedom of expression defences, are looking at the clause that we wanted them to prove intent to stir up hatred rather than just stirring up hatred. They wanted to be intent to stir. So there have been various issues, political issues, that I think we've become more involved in. Well, since my time in PEN, and I think that just reflects the times. That you can't pretend writers live in ivory towers. I don't think they ever have, actually.
So have you been directly involved in that defamation kind of article?
Well, I've been directly involved in that as a member of the board. We've been passing information and the proposals we put forward and we've been discussing those and approving those or not approving. You know, yes, I've been involved in that. I haven't been directly involved. Other members of the board have been more involved in that than I have, but I've certainly sort of been supportive of that in different ways. I mean, we've had some really interesting discussions, and we don't always agree. These questions are very complicated, as you know, and the closer you get, the more complicated they seem to be.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about PEN is that it does discuss these things seriously. Yeah.
And have you ever directly kind of benefited from PEN's support as a writer yourself? I mean, obviously you've described that benefits in some ways from just being involved and being attend conferences, but have you kind of received any support in terms of your own writing? Or
No, I haven't needed that. I haven't needed that.
Yeah.
But if I did, you know, I know PEN are there. I mean, obviously I would have to prove my case, as it were, but I haven't needed that.
And what about, we've talked, suppose, about Scottish PEN, about PEN. Do you think there's anything particularly distinctive about Scottish PEN as a organization within the organization? Are there markers of its distinctiveness, either historically or as things stand now? I mean, it's obviously governed by, as all the groups are, by these fundamental principles, but do you think those principles have been put into action perhaps in distinctive ways over the years within?
Well, I think, I mean, I teach Scottish literature, so I think that the distinctive thing about literature in Scotland is it's in 3 languages to start with, and I think that creates diversity in quite interesting ways. I mean, it was interesting when I was at the Icelandic conference, the PEN organisation that wanted to speak to us were the Quebecois and the Catalans, because they wanted to know how the diversity of language was coped with in Scotland, and how it was coped with politically and how it was coped with personally. So I think Scottish PEN does have a different identity, an identity of its own, which I think is quite right. I mean, it's not separate; it's part of the diversity.
Yeah, and how have those different languages affected the organization over the years? I mean, is the constitution been translated into different languages, or has it just been presented in English and interpreted?
Well, I honestly can't answer that question. I would like to think it was available in Gaelic, but I'm not sure. But we are very aware of there being 3 languages, and we're trying to accommodate those as much as we can. Yeah, I never thought about that. I must.
Well, it occurred to me that I've seen it in English. I've seen the Scottish Constitution, way back from the, decades ago, but I haven't seen one translated.
So neither have I, and that is quite interesting. That's something I think we should discuss at the board level, definitely.
Or in Scots. And in terms of thinking about the history of the organization, who do you think have been the influential figures, both maybe positive and maybe negative as well? Who've been the sort of movers and shakers, as it were, in the years of its existence? Have there been any?
Well, obviously our founders, were quite political in finding PEN and wanting to give writers, and especially MacDermot, because he felt Scotland ought to have its own identity, though he was never quite sure what that should be sometimes politically.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think different people have contributed different things, and I think there have been conflicts within PEN, but none that have been destructive. I mean, I think, because you are allowed to have your own voice, and I think that's important. And that goes along with the diversity bit, I think, really.
Yeah. So I wonder if you've seen, now you talked a little bit at the beginning about the big changes that have come on the back of I suppose, so technological changes in communication and publishing, and you know, information technology. Do you think that has been, you know, the biggest boost, but maybe also challenge, or have there been other equally significant challenges to the organization over the years? It feels as though the debate about defamation, freedom of speech, these are all kind of overlapping debates, I suppose.
Yes, they are.
Particularly intense, haven't they, in the last 5 to 10
Yes,
years?
they have. They have.
Has that been a real turning point of in the history of Scottish PEN, do you think, or have there
I
been?
wouldn't say it was a turning point. I think it's again a development of diversity, and trying to acknowledge that we exist in the world. We're not a little kind of ivory tower existence at all. I think these have been challenges, but I hope we've tried to cope's not the word, but to try
Adapt.
to acknowledge them. Yes, I mean, we did a project a few years ago called Many Voices that all the board were involved in at different levels, and that was to look at people in Scottish society who are marginalised. I think that went very well, and we linked into all kinds of other literary organisations and literary groups. We put resident writers into various scenarios. I think that went well. I think there are challenges for us. I think, we're in a rapidly changing political landscape at the moment. I mean, I'm English, obviously. I've lived here 50 years. I think of myself as Scottish. That's where I feel my heart and my head are. But I think there's been an increasing awareness in Scotland of Scottish identity in a political sense, and that's bound to reflect itself in its writers as well. But I always think of PEN as political with a small p. I mean, we don't have big political agendas. I mean, I know some of the political opinions of my board members, but not all of them. But if we're working together on a common cause, we try and look at areas where we can actually make change that we can all do together. It's not. No, I think. To me, I think present times are making people more political with a big P. I think it's inevitable. I don't see how. And I think PEN has to negotiate that. It has to.
I mean, it's in the charter, isn't it? The friendly cooperation between writers.
Absolutely.
Showing direct engagement with political action. So, so that's a kind of challenge, isn't it? That distinction between the politics with the big P, so that it's not that it's not an organization that excludes people because of political beliefs.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But nonetheless, is scrutinizing
yes.
and potentially objecting to certain political ideas in
well, if we think there is oppression, unjust oppression of writers, which there undoubtedly is in certain parts of the world, let us hope it never happens here. Who knows?
Yeah.
We live in funny times.
Yeah, and do you think PEN has always been good at bringing in young writers? Because a few of the other interviewees expressed concerns about the inclusiveness of younger writers, of kind of the next generation, and they talked as well about the Many Voices projects being quite important in that attractiveness to
yes.
who are younger.
I think that was a very good project. I think it was a good project for everyone in the organisation. I think we need to do more of that. Definitely, we need to do more of that. I mean, I set up a student branch of PEN at Edinburgh University, which required a bit of struggle, but we got there. And the first event was to do with young Turkish writers, so that was really quite interesting. I think partly it's because younger writers have different concerns in their own in their own lives. They're setting up their careers in different ways. But I think that's an area, yes, that is important.
So that they maybe don't get involved with the organization running itself, but there might be more involved.
No, they don't, but they come to events. I mean,
Yeah.
we get a lot of young writers at events, and I mean, poetry is my thing, and we get a lot of young poets coming along.
And the student
Yeah.
organization at Edinburgh, is that student run now? Do they run events
Yes,
themselves?
but the trouble with that, of course, is at the moment it's impossible this year. And of course, the trouble with students is they kind of, they're only there for a bit and then they go away. But what's really interesting about the setting up of PEN, I think the first chairman was a scientist who worked in King's Buildings. So that was good. You see, that's very good that, but he wrote poetry. And so I think if you can kind of get across the young, wherever they happen to be working, it's very good. Yeah. But it's hard for students to have consistency. And so I don't know what will happen. We'll have to try and see what can happen next year, because students at the moment, it's just not possible. And it's very recent we've set it up. So it's not secure enough to do online things or anything like that, I think. And students have a lot of demands at the moment.
Yeah. And I suppose the organisation has been very much associated with creative writing, with journalistic writing.
Yeah.
Of course, I imagine science journalism, which is sometimes very political as well, is potentially, a very valuable part of that remit, which is not often perhaps recognised.
We had an astronomer doing an event once for us, because she had written a novel. And that was really interesting. And I think that kind of, as an academic, I think that interdisciplinary stuff's very good. And I think it can bring the young in as well, because they have different things to contribute. Yeah.
So I wanted to think, I suppose, finally, really, about the future and what you think the challenges are for PEN. I mean, we've talked a bit about some of those, and certainly about the challenges in the context of the pandemic, in terms of maintaining continuity and maintaining engagement, and I suppose supporting writers in whose circumstances may have become significantly more difficult as a result. But what do you think are, perhaps the more longer term challenges for Scottish PEN? Is it to do with maintaining, interest in from younger writers? Is it to do with technology? What do you think?
Well, I think both these are opportunities, not just challenges. I think we can utilize technology, and I think the last year has shown us we can do it in different ways. I've even surprised myself with that. So I think that is a way that we might be able to link more people into events. Though I do think live events are important as well. We already do link in with book festivals in various ways and try and have PEN events at book festivals. So I think that's important. I think politically it's hard to know what the future of Scotland's going to be. I don't think that means that PEN's going to be any less involved with PEN International, and it's the internationalism of PEN that's very important. And there are more calls now on PEN to help writers in various parts of the world. And not all of them established writers either. Young writers are getting... I expect also the pandemic's going to make it difficult for writers to get published. It means that some of them are going to have lost the jobs that actually bring in the bread and butter, and that's going to make it more difficult for them.
Yeah, so those writers that are perhaps more dependent on audiences, like poets.
That's right, absolutely. So I just think PEN needs to be there. I mean, I think it can be a resource. I think it can be a support. I think it can help writers link with one another. I think that's what's one of the values of PEN, while not being partisan and trying to be... I think we just have to engage with the world as it is, not as we want it to be. But then that's a bit banal, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I suppose there is a sense of a world in the way you want it to be, in the sense that it's a world of friendly cooperation, right? I mean, that is a kind of principle, a moving principle, isn't it? And it's
even though we're surrounded not by a world of friendly cooperation at the moment, so there is that kind of paradox. And I think we just have to keep hoping that it's possible to maintain these things. I mean, I think PEN's important. I think it's important in the alliances it forms with other literary organisations.
Yeah.
I think it has to be quite clear about what it can and can't do. I mean, it's not Amnesty International, it's not, you know, it's not a union. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I think it can provide a forum where writers can share ideas and experiences and events together. And I think that's important.
Yeah. So it is about sort of, from what you're saying, advice, you know, so you're involved in offering kind of advice on the basis of experience, of providing venues for discussion, whatever, you know, whatever format they take. Um, but so sort of hosting an advisory, but to a small extent also intervening, in the sense that, you know, intervening in order to provide refuge. I mean, that is a form of intervention, isn't it? I suppose
I
that's
expect it is.
correct.
It has to be handled very carefully. I mean, we've got models of Norway have done it, and Sweden, of course, have done it, and various other places have done it. I mean, that is just, but that is not our main objective at the moment, mainly because we have very little money to do anything with.
You need space, don't you, for that? You need
Yeah, you do. And it needs to be consistent. You know, I mean, it's not philanthropic. It's got to be real. I still think there's a place for PEN, definitely. I think it will change. We always try and send delegates from Scottish PEN to international conferences, because I think they're of great value because of the connections that you make. And they're jolly hard work as well. I mean, you know, that's because everyone is taking what they're doing quite seriously. I was quite surprised how it was very exciting as well. Unlike some academic conferences.
Yeah.
And it's the diversity that I find so exciting and challenging. And I hope we can keep that in a real way and not in a way that becomes conflicted in it. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Does that sound too hopeful?
No, that sounds admirably hopeful. I mean, one has to be hopeful always, really. And I think that's, you know, when I've been doing quite a lot of research on the PEN papers, really from the late 20s onwards, and the intense threats and barriers to be overcome, you know, Second World War, and various international conflicts since then have been hugely challenging for the organization, but it's come through and managed to find ways of supporting, you know, even maintaining debate with writers in the Second World War who clearly had fascist views, but robust debate happened, and seemed to be within the context of a certain degree of mutual respect. And I think if you can come through those years of you know,
yes, exactly,
then we can surely overcome our current obstacles. So there's a lot to be learned from that history, I think, and that's a lot to be learned in terms of maintaining hopefulness.
And again, you know, I hate to use the word diversity again, but, you know, different cultures have different ways of doing things. They're not necessarily better or worse, they're just different. And I think if you can have mutual respect, you can understand that.
Yeah.
It sounds very aspirational. You got me on a good day, so on a bad day, I just feel the world is going to hell in a handcart. But today's a better day.
Yeah, the sun is shining a little bit today, and sometimes
a little bit, yes. So even in Edinburgh, yes.
Well, that's probably a good note to end on, Joyce, with a little ray of sunshine greeting us on the horizon, even if it's on the distant horizon.